double toilet trouble, fire burner, cauldron bubble, fill it up, fanny snake, in the cauldron, boiling bay, double toilet trouble.
Greetings. In this episode, I will talk about the so-called Salem witch trials that took place in 1692 to 1693 in the town of Salem in New England. The events I want to discuss in this video began in Salem Village in the state of Massachusetts in New England and spread to other settlements in the state. The trials themselves took place in the town of Salem, which shares its name with the aforementioned village. In January 1692, the daughter and niece of the local pastor Samuel Parris, 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris, and 11-year-old Abigail Williams exhibited symptoms of an unknown illness. The girls screamed, made strange sounds, threw objects, hid under furniture, and their bodies contorted into unusual positions. They also complained of pins pricking their bodies. When the pastor tried to read them a sermon, they covered their ears, which was considered a sure sign of demonic possession. The local doctor, William Griggs, who examined them, found no signs of illness and declared that the girls had all fallen victim to witchcraft. The culprit was quickly found. A slave named Tituba served in the Parris household. Many residents indeed suspected Tituba of witchcraft, as she had been brought from Barbados by Parris and often told the girls stories about voodoo magic. Meanwhile, the number of girls with the strange illness increased, reaching 7, including the youngest daughter of the Parris' neighbors, Ann Putnam. They exhibited the same symptoms, and when questioned, the children accused and named 2 more women as witches: the quarrelsome neighbor, Sarah Osborne, and the beggar, Sarah Good. These 2 were convenient targets for accusations, as neither woman regularly attended church. On March 1st, 1692, all 3 women were arrested. The suspects were subjected to humiliating examinations designed to find witch marks on their bodies. Tituba confessed to the investigators, claiming that she and the other arrested women were witches who flew on broomsticks and tormented the afflicted girls. The other arrested women initially denied everything, but the pressure on them increased. A trial experiment was conducted on Sarah Good. The afflicted girls were brought in and told to look at the witch. The girls immediately began screaming and convulsing, which the judges took as convincing evidence of her guilt. The children's stories and the authorities' provocations had a profound impact, engulfing the population of Salem in mass paranoia. Every other citizen began to be suspected of witchcraft. The shadow of a witchcraft conspiracy fell not only on the imprisoned women, but also on their relatives and other inconvenient townspeople. As a result, arrests became widespread. In March 1692, Martha Corey, Rebecca Nurse, and Rachel Clinton were arrested, along with Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter, Dorothy. Martha Corey was among those who considered the events a farce, which was also seen as a sign of involvement in witchcraft. Little Dorothy Good simply wanted to be with her mother and, under adult pressure, agreed to confess to being a witch. While the first 3 arrested women did not attend church, which made them criminals in the eyes of the Puritans, the new suspects were diligent churchgoers. There was a split among the residents of Salem. Many believed the situation had gone too far. However, the majority sided with the accusers. The investigation continued. In April 1692, a second wave of arrests took place. Sarah Cloyce, Elizabeth Proctor, and her husband, John Proctor, Martha Corey's husband, Giles, and several others were arrested. On April 20th, 1692, 12-year-old Ann Putnam, whom I mentioned earlier, claimed that she had been visited by the ghost of a pastor who choked and terrified her. She named the pastor George Burroughs. George Burroughs was a highly respected man. It is worth noting that pastors in Puritan communities were elected by local residents from among the most esteemed individuals and were supported by the community's funds. However, the detainees, who by then numbered around 30, began testifying against him. He was accused of flying with the girls to the top of a mountain to make them pledge allegiance to the devil, organizing witches' Sabbaths, and casting spells on soldiers who were then defeated by Native Americans. In May 1692, the trial began. However, Sarah Osborne did not live to see the verdict, dying in prison on May 10th. During the trial, the fact that the devil himself was causing the girls' suffering was not questioned. The main evidence was the girls' testimonies that the spirits of the accused appeared to them. The theological debate around using these testimonies centered on whether a person had to consent to the devil using their likeness. The court argued that the devil required a person's consent, making the accused guilty of the girls' suffering since they had granted the devil the right to appear in their likeness. Opponents claimed that the devil could use a person's likeness without their consent. The judges were not convinced by the defense's arguments. The first person sentenced to death was Bridget Bishop. She had a rather quarrelsome nature, and most people had no doubt about her guilt. Her sister's husband confirmed that she was a witch. In the eyes of society, she behaved too eccentrically and rarely paid her bills on time, which did not align with the Puritan lifestyle. Bridget Bishop was hanged on June 10th, 1692. The trial steadily gained momentum. On June 30th, 1692, 5 women, including Sarah Good and Rebecca Nurse, were sentenced to death. They were hanged on July 19th. Before her execution, with the noose already around her neck, Sarah Good addressed Reverend Nicholas Noyes, who was involved in the trial, saying, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. Take my life, and God will give you blood to drink." This prophecy came true. A few years later, Noyes died from a hemorrhage, bleeding from the mouth before his death. On August 5th, 1692, the court sentenced 6 more people to be hanged. This time, they were devout churchgoers who observed fasts and followed all church canons. Former pastor George Burroughs addressed the assembled crowd before his death, pointing out the complete absurdity of the accusations and concluding by reciting the Lord's Prayer flawlessly. During the height of the witch hunt, it was believed that a person under the devil's influence could not recite the prayer without stumbling. In the crowd, murmurs began, but the executioner assured those gathered that the devil invisibly attended the execution, guiding the former pastor's recitation of the prayer. George Burroughs was hanged. Finally, on September 22nd, 1692, another 8 individuals were executed, marking the last of the executions. Earlier, Giles Corey, an 80-year-old farmer whose wife was among those executed, steadfastly refused to admit guilt and was subjected to the torture of pressing. Heavy stones were placed on Corey's chest, and he slowly died under their weight. The torture lasted for 2 days, but he died without confessing. Researchers explain his persistence by the fact that admitting guilt would have led to his conviction and the confiscation of his property. Clearly, Corey chose to die rather than deprive his family of their belongings. The madness did not cease. Afflicted girls were taken to neighboring towns like Topsfield, Andover, and even the state capital, Boston, to determine if the suspects detained there were witches and sorcerers. To the credit of Salem's residents, there were those from the outset who did not believe this story, considering the girls to be simulating a strange illness. If we let these girls have their way, we will all soon be witches and demons here. We should tie them to a post and give them a good whipping, said one citizen. The events began to frighten even those who had initially initiated the process. Highly respected residents began to express the opinion that the court had no right to consider visions of the victims as evidence, and the idea that it was better to allow several witches to survive than to execute even one innocent person. Priests almost unanimously stated that visions of the victims should not be used as evidence, as they could be tricks of the devil to discredit the innocent. Governor William Phips of Massachusetts, initially having authorized the trials of witches, upon reviewing these opinions, first prohibited the issuance of death sentences and subsequently new arrests. According to some accounts, he did this for personal reasons. The girls had accused his own wife of witchcraft. 28 people were released from custody out of 33. For the remaining 5, the Massachusetts Supreme Court was established to hear their cases, a body that continues to operate today. In May 1693, all remaining defendants in the Salem witch trials were set free. During the trials, over 150 people were imprisoned. 31 were convicted, with 19 executed by hanging. 2, including Sarah Osborne, died in jail. 1, Giles Corey, died under torture, and 1 person escaped. 4-year-old Dorothy Good spent 8 months in jail and lost her mother. In 1697, it was announced that a judicial error had occurred during the trials, and in 1702, the court's decision was declared unlawful. In 1706, Ann Putnam, who had accused George Burroughs leading to his hanging, wrote a letter of repentance asking forgiveness from those who had suffered and acknowledging that her accusations were the result of ignorance and delusion by Satan. In 1711, all those who had been affected were restored to their civil rights by legislation, and the names of those executed were cleared. Compensation was paid to their families. Finally, in 1752, the village of Salem was renamed Danvers. Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams, who were central figures in the incident, faced widespread condemnation and scorn. There is no record of either of them publicly apologizing to the condemned or expressing remorse for what happened. Over the 300 years since these events, dozens of theories have been proposed regarding what could have caused everything to unfold. Among these theories are a conspiracy among children who decided to play a prank, poisoning by some hallucinogenic substance, poisoning by ergot fungus, which I discussed in the video Fire of St. Anthony, and finally, illness such as encephalitis, lethargica, or Huntington's disease affecting the nervous system. However, none of these causes would have been fatal if not for the societal atmosphere of that time, where mass hysteria leading to witch hunts was commonplace. New England was populated by followers of one branch of Calvinism, the Puritans. A cornerstone of their doctrine was belief in absolute predestination, the belief that each person's fate was determined by God before the creation of the world at the beginning of time. God merely sends signals to the chosen, and one must only be able to understand these signals. They were characterized by extreme moral strictness, chastity, and ascetic restriction of needs, diligence, and ambition. For example, toys were considered useless, and children helped adults with work from a young age. Various disasters, such as crop failures, epidemics, and attacks by Native Americans, were explained by the machinations of the devil, acting through his agents, such as witches and wizards. Therefore, witchcraft was treated extremely seriously. Since 1641, it was legislatively punishable by death. In such an atmosphere, the described situation could indeed have arisen. So the story of the Salem witch trials is concluded. Goodbye.